Hey, what's up, guys? My name is Shane Kofed, and I'm the producer of the How to Build an App podcast, along with Austin and Beaudry from Strides Development. And these guys have been a wealth of knowledge as far as how the app building process goes, beyond the fact that they can build really insanely awesome apps. I'm just surprised over and over with the depth of their knowledge when it comes to thinking through your idea, building out a technical roadmap, putting prototypes together, and I've been pretty shocked over and over at the kind of guests that they talk to and the knowledge that they have. So what I asked them to do was come on and do a quick Q&A about this offer that we'll get more in depth on. But I wanted to do a quick Q&A on basically my biggest question to Austin and Beaudry for you guys both with this app accelerator offer that we're going to talk about is really, I want to leave people with an understanding of why they should invest some money up front in strategy and in getting that right, and not just invest right away in writing code, committing code, putting app designs together, and like kind of jumping in with both feet. Because I think over and over, that's kind of what I've seen from being able to shadow some of your client calls and things like that. Over and over, that's what you guys keep pushing, and so that's kind of the tone that I want to help these founders walk away from, is understanding why they should almost take a half a step back in order to take 10 steps forward. Does that sound pretty fair to you guys?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So
Yeah, that makes total sense.
maybe a way to kind of cue it up is it seems to me like if I could, package up all of the conversations that I've heard and kind of the common theme between people that have built these successful apps and these people that you've interviewed, it seems like a lot of people say that they wish they almost would have taken a pause. They wish they would have spent a little bit more time on their vision, on understanding what their app really was before they just started spending money on development. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, no, 100%. And if we could like kind of have it like a deathbed of those, if they could tell us a couple of things, we found that they all kind of say the same thing. So really, the first one is, I would say majority of our app founders who've built apps always say they wish they were more focused on and more specific on who their customer was and what problem they were trying to solve for them. I'd say that's really kind of one of the most common ones. The next one is they always wish they would have launched a little bit sooner, and they were more specific about which type of features or what type of what was most mandatory for that launch, and they would have led with that first and launched way sooner. The last one is they would have saved so much money if they would have just refined their design before they actually went to a development team. Basically, build those blueprints and get a better idea of what it's supposed to do, how it's supposed to act, what problem it's supposed to solve. Once we have that really figured out, we would then go to a development team.
Beaudry, I love that. I think that's so perfectly well said, and I think that kind of gives some clarity into what that means. Oh, I wish I was more specific around my vision before I started. Austin, question for you: What the first point that you said, Beaudry? I wish I would have known who my customer was and what problem we were actually solving. Like Austin, I mean, as a the most technical one here on this conversation, right? Like I wouldn't really think that you guys would be talking so much around knowing your customer and solving problems. It's like you guys would be more focused on like the technical issues. Like, why is it so important to know your customer and understand the actual problem you're solving?
So, knowing your customer is just really important in general for whatever business you're running. But what I want to kind of do is talk a little bit about the people who care about that and the people who don't care about that. So, you've got two different types of developers. The first kind of developers, all they care about is the money they get and the problems that they're solving. They don't really care about your business. They're not necessarily bought in. And when you hire that kind of developer, you get an okay product, right? And then there's this other side where developers are bought in on your project, they're bought in on your vision, and are really focused on your success. And when you have people focusing on your success, you have to start asking founders harder questions to make sure that you're spending the time on the right things. Because if you as a founder flop, I as a developer flop for two reasons. One, let's be honest, there's no revenue moving forward and I've got to go look for something else to do. But two, if you're successful, I'm going to have way better of a portfolio piece to share. And like, that's important to me. Like, I don't just want to be working on cool things. I want to be working on things that are used by people. Yeah. So to kind of dive back to the main question, knowing who your customer is allows us to build the features that are actually important. So
Mm,
what happens is one of the biggest things that founders mentioned was they were building the wrong things for the wrong people. And what happens is, I think Twitch is a perfect example of this. They made a huge pivot because the original people using the product that all ended up unsubscribing uh, weren't their true market. It was gamers, but they weren't targeting gamers initially. If they would have targeted gamers initially, they would have not had to revamp their entire project. So if you spend a little bit more time validating your market, you're more likely to have a successful product. And that's what we want to ensure happens. We want to make sure you're successful. So we really focus in on the validation piece, knowing your customers, knowing your market, and knowing what features are important.
So one follow up question on that is, what would you say to somebody? Because I've done this early in my career too. Like I've done this where you when you start focusing in, it starts feeling scary, right? Like if you say, hey, I only want to target these types of gamers, or this type of business person with this specific need, and they're only between 25 and 30. It's not 15 to 65. It starts to feel really scary, and you start to think like, wait, is my audience going to be large enough for this thing to actually be successful? In all the conversations you've had with everybody on the podcast and everything, what would you say is kind of like the rebuttal to that, to the person saying, well, hey, I can't focus too specifically, or I'm not going to have enough customers to go after? What would you say to that?
So it's kind of funny. So your whole goal as a technical founder should be to spend the smallest amount of money to bring value to somebody that they're actually going to pay for it. Like at the end of the day, like you can say you're passionate about it, but it's a business. Like you're trying to get revenue. And by pushing too many verticals, you spread yourself thin. You don't know who you're targeting, and you end up building ultimately the wrong thing. Now, I don't necessarily think you need to define your market like that small as to a specific game. Not only are we figuring out who is most likely to use your product, but we're also figuring out the price maximizing point. So what we would do is we'd step back and not just focus on a specific game, but what we would do is we'd see, hey, across these genres of games, that's where the most amount of like revenue stands. So we should be building features for this specific group. So we're not just trying to narrow in exactly on a specific market, but we want to narrow in on the set of people that are going to bring you to revenue the quickest and make sure we build features for them. That's why our app accelerator program is so valuable.
Yeah, if I could add one thing to it, I think we were talking with, oh man, Austin, I can't remember who it was. Oh, it was the CEO of Zencaster. And we were talking about just find 500 people that are willing to pay you $30 a month, right? Like that is a niche. That's a small amount of market. So if I could find those features and those values for those 500 people, that's enough to really make you live pretty happily. I mean, it depends on where you want to scale, but to go along with Shane, your question is like, oh, my market's too niche. No, literally, that's you can be successful. I mean, how many niche markets are successful do we build for? So,
No, I think you nailed that totally.
well, and the fact is, just know who your customer is. Don't worry about how many there are, but know them. Know who they are. Know exactly what they want. Know what their problems are. Know what they think about before they fall asleep. And if you can find that out, you can build value for anybody that's within that
And
niche.
that's our whole goal at Strides, right? Like our goal isn't to try and make a $500 million company, but our goal is to get you to first $100 a month, then $1,000 a month, right? Like you need to find your first customer and then start iterating. You don't need to scale to the moon. You need to start small, get your first couple of users, and continue to build.
That's awesome. And that reminds me too of when we were in Seaside, we were talking to Jay about flip flops, right? And he was almost like so laser specific that I mean, these are smart guys that have done huge business, and he was so laser specific about serving this one community that when he described how specific it was and how the needs of that community and how well he knew that community, you're like, dude, of course this thing is going to work, right? If he would have tried to say, oh, we're going to do this bigger thing and serve all of Florida, you'd be like, well, wait, what's different about you and DoorDash? And all of a sudden would have turned into something not interesting at all, if he tried to go bigger.
Exactly.
That's so interesting. Cool. The second point. So, and this actually piggybacking on knowing your customer. This reminds me of the conversation we had with Jay as well, where he said, basically one of his regrets after launching the app is he just wishes he would have been a little bit more specific around what features were required and what was nice to have, right? And that could have controlled budgets, controlled priorities, controlled timelines, things like that. Beaudry, what's your thought on that? Why is that so valuable for founders to know?
That's a great question, Shane, and something that really separates Strides development from other development shops is if you come to a development shop and hand them a list of features, they're just going to build them, right? Just great. When you hand us a list of features, our first question is, which one's most important? Which one is going to bring value now, not what's going to bring value later? And by knowing that, we can prioritize what's most important to that consumer to make sure that we build what and we're solving the biggest problems first and working down. By doing that, we're going to save hundreds, if not thousands, or hundreds of thousands of dollars by building what's most important now. And so we're going to ask that next question. Can we build all of those? Absolutely. Our developers are more talented than anybody that I've ever seen. But the real question, which ones do we do first? And if we knew that question, and that's what all these dying app founders would say, if I knew what feature to develop first and started with that, I would have saved hundreds of thousands of dollars from there.
Well, and it's funny because I've seen. I mean, the conversation with Jay down at Seaside is fresh on my mind, right? But I can remember when he was saying, oh, if we had done this, this, and this would have cut, a lot of time off our development. And I've seen you guys do this over and over with clients where you take something that might take 2 years and you condense it down to say, you're like delivering things. We're delivering things in a couple of months instead of a couple of years. But it was funny thinking back to that conversation with Jay, how the overall timeline on flip flops was still only, what was it, 12 months or 9 months, Austin?
No, we had an MVP in 3 and a polished product in 6.
So it's funny that he was noticing the inefficiencies and saying, hey, that could have been so much faster. I remember when he said that, I was like, dude, this would take, I've had friends build other apps similar to this. This would have been 3-4 years, So he was saying, oh, we still could have been more efficient. And you guys were still so much faster than anything I've seen on that scale.
Yeah, it's super funny. And I kind of want to hit on this too. It's like, I think one of the funniest things is when I ask a founder for like what their budget is. It's not so I could max your budget. It's so that I have an idea of what's important and prioritize from there. So I can tell you, hey, instead of these 6 features, it's these 3 features. So it's like, if you go to somebody, give them a budget, that just shows that you know what you want, in my opinion. If you have no idea and you're just looking for a blind quote, that means nothing. Like anybody can give you a number, like, I don't know. So really like hone in on that as well, because your budget should be what outlines your feature list.
Yeah. Well, I love what we're going to talk about next. I have one more question for you guys, and then we'll kind of get into the specifics of this app accelerator. But what you just said, because as a non-technical, I've been in the role of a non-technical founder before, and it's hard to know a budget when you really don't have any idea what things cost, how long they should take. So I love that you guys are going to go through that and cover that. But before we get to that, one more question, and this one's for you, Austin. On that third point you mentioned, Bodri, you said, hey, I would have saved so much money if I had refined my designs before engaging a development team. And Austin, we just did a roundtable conversation with a bunch of people on your development team, and we talked a lot about this, right? Of this being one of the biggest complaints, that founders will kind of have these harebrained or these ideas or these feature ideas, or hey, it should maybe kind of work like that, and they'll kind of lean on the dev and say, hey, can you just make it like this page, but instead of the button be here, give them 10 things, and hey, you got that right. And we talked about the importance of actually refining everything down into a finished design. Can you just kind of speak to that a little bit as far as how much that accelerates the process and how much that speeds things up and how much money that saves?
Yeah. So really good point here. There's 2 things that you really need to understand. The first one is the less you can make a developer think, the more money you're going to save. Like if you understand that, you're already on the right track. The next thing to really understand is just because you have a design doesn't mean it's the most efficient design. So one thing that like really gets under my skin is when somebody goes and hires a third-party designer and they return something that's dribble candy, right? You can go and design something that's the prettiest thing in the entire world, but in all reality, it's probably the most expensive way to do it. And again, you're a new founder, you're
impossible.
just starting, or impossible. I think that's a really good point, Bodri. And so it's super important that you work with a designer who's worked with developers in the past, and they're building things that fit within the budget and are possible, right? And so what we do here at Strides is we take that design and we iterate on it. So the conversation usually goes like this. Brian will hand me a design file and I'll be like, hey, that looks super awesome, but they've got a budget of this. If we were to move this button here, move this, and change this completely, we would save them like a couple $1,000s. And that's That's a huge deal. So iteration is also super important in the design phase.
I just wanted to say that our goal is to save you money, right? And that's something I can't express more. When you give us a budget, don't be scared to give us a budget, because ultimately our goal is to go under that budget, because then you have a budget to be able to do additional features. And so that design feature, by taking that idea, everybody has this idea of an app, and be able to organize it and give it a path and a step-by-step process through a design, it's going to clear up all the confusion that any developers might have. And it's going to basically say, I want to get from point A to point B, and this is the route to go. And a developer can do that, and it's a lot cheaper. So as we develop this, every time we look at people and we meet with people, we're always building and designing within a budget. And the other thing I wanted to add to it is, during this design feature and this design stage, and why this high fidelity prototype is so important, if there's something you don't like and you want to change, it's as easy as a click of a button and a move and a drag and drop and finished. Austin, is it that easy? Would you actually have an app out? Like, let's say I pull up flip-flops right now and say, hey, you know what? I want the checkout to be on the other side of the page. How hard is that?
Um, that's super funny. It's not the easiest thing in the entire world. And I think Brian's podcast, he explains this. He's like, seriously, I moved a button within 10 minutes. For the developer to refactor that took 100 hours.
Wow.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah, so perfect. So let's put some hard numbers by it. Let's just say the development cost to design and develop is $175. It took Brian 10 minutes. So I divide that by 60 minutes times 10. Brian cost us $29.16. But for a development agency at $175, took them 100 hours, it cost them $17,500. So let's put that into numbers. $30, that's lunch. $17,000, that's a new motorcycle.
That's a down payment on the new Tesla truck.
Yeah.
That's a new down on the Tesla
Yeah.
truck. So really, I'm putting down hard numbers. 10 minutes, $29, 100 hours for the same thing. So I just can't push this in your brains hard enough. Make sure that you put a good design together, and make sure that design is what you want before you even take it to a developer.
Just to put a bow on that, Baudry, I think that is exactly what we help founders solve with this App Accelerator program, right? Of saying, because I think especially first time founders are just so eager to jump in. They want to see code, they want to see backend, they want to see all this stuff. But I mean, man, if you can save that much money by just taking an extra, taking a breath, taking an extra day, taking an extra 2 days to think it through, solving it in design before you move on, I mean, that's totally worth a couple of days to save that kind of money. And then and what I want to add on to what you said, Baudry, is I've seen you guys over and over. Like, I don't think you guys have any goals of coming in and being the cheapest dev shop, but I've really seen you maximize that budget, right? So if they're saving $17,000 on this one feature, that might be 5 or 6 other features they could roll out that maybe wouldn't have made round one, right?
And that makes the app better. And our goal is not to make money. Like, we're not trying to max out your budget. We're trying to make the best app within your budget, because like Austin said at the beginning, the better your app is, the more people that use it, the better that we as a development shop look, and the happier you are. So when someone comes to you as a founder, like, hey, I need to build an app, it's no question who you're going to go to, right? The more people that use your app, the more people that like your app, the more people that are successful with your app, the more successful we are. We are aligned with your goals as a company. We do not want your app that's going to cost $50,000 to build and no one's going to use it. We don't want to take that project on, because it doesn't help us as a company. And we want to maximize what your budget is, and we want to build the best app within that budget.
Very cool. So as we're wrapping up here, can I ask you guys a few questions and run through kind of these 3 phases that are included in the App Accelerator program, and just kind of hit on each one for a minute? Is that okay? So the first phase is validation, right? And first of all, can you just kind of explain what is this, a high level view of like kind of what's included, and why is that the most important first step for a founder to take with their app?
So validation is super important because, again, it's going to tell you if you have product market fit. I think the company we partnered with says somewhere around 42% of startups fail because there's no product market need. So what we're doing is
the number one reason
And so if we can clear that up, you increase your chances as a company succeeding a ton, right? And so what we do in validation is we talk with your customers. So we basically go and run surveys, we ask a ton of questions, we figure out what customers like, what they don't like, how much they're willing to pay. I think that's super important. And what we do is we take all this data and we flush out anybody who isn't actually in your market and show you 50 to 100 people that would actually buy your product and get their suggestions. And that's super important. And with that information, we can actually start things like branding and marketing. And I kind of want to hit on that just really quickly because if you're marketing when your app's done, you've started too late. So by having that information, you can actually build a design for your app, for your target market. You can start the important things like branding and you can start the important things like marketing. And then as a development shop, we can start with the features that are most important because we're getting information on between a scale of 1 and 10 what feature or what set of things are most important. So that's what we do in the validation. We talk with customers, we get responses, and we get feedback.
Yep. And if your product might not have enough product market fit, we get what will make it. We get those features, and so then we know what is most important.
Got it. And just one clarifying question on that. Does this mean that, somebody comes in with their idea and they've had, maybe they had a dream or they have a vision of this product they really want to build? Does that mean that you're going to come in and just like, kill their entire idea, or kind of walk through? I know you guys did one just recently, like earlier this week, right? And what was that process like? Like, how much did it change from the founder's original vision? And then did it change so much that the founder was like, oh, I'm not interested in that app? Or what was kind of that experience for that founder when he started seeing that data?
I want to have Beaudry answer this, but I want to put a little thing in there. As a founder, if you come in with an idea and are not willing to change or move, like right there, you're probably not going to make it. So you need to be able to make pivots. And that's what our goal is. Now, I want to put out there, not everybody who comes to us is going to get product market fit, but you saved way more than you would have just developing it, right? And I think that's a big thing. Not every idea is a great idea, but if you can put a bunch of smart people in a room, brainstorm, and pivot, which is what we help do with you, you have a way more likely chance of succeeding. But Bojo, I kind of want you to talk about that.
Yeah. So Shane, to kind of ask your question, yes, we might kill your dream right then and there. That's very possible. And I hate to say it, but you might have an idea that you think is great, but it could be crushed. And so we recently had a client come in, and we did the surveys and found out he had an idea of what he wanted the project to be. And Eric Espinoza, the owner of Venture Validator, we sat down in a meeting, and he goes, if you would have went to any other dev shop and had them build this, you would have failed miserably and spent tens of thousands of dollars failing at your idea. It was harsh. I was like kind of cringing when he said this. He says straight up, what you brought us, your idea, would have failed, but you went to Strides instead, and then we partnered with them, and here's what's going to happen. And then he said, if we were to alter this, and this, your product market, because you need a 7.5 to be successful or
On
higher.
their score, on their maybe.
And if you don't know what that is, go check out our podcast. It's at strides.dev
go to our podcast.
podcast.
Yeah, that's how we wanted to end this, is make sure you go see Eric Espinoza's podcast and watch this. But he goes, you need a 7.5. He wasn't there. He says, you would have failed. But if you would change this, and this, we would get you to a 7.8. And so now, as a design team, we can say, most important is A, B, and C. Let's design those first to make sure we get the most important product market fit beforehand. And so really what it comes down to is they send out all these surveys, they ask them very, very good questions, and they find out what is most important for you and if you would buy it. And yes, Shane, we might crush your dreams, guys. If you're listening, your dream might be crushed here, but guess what? You're going to save tens, thousands of dollars. And not only are we going to crush your dreams, but we might be able to salvage that dream and put it back together and be able to make it to what people want.
And ultimately probably make it into something that the founder is more excited about, right? I mean, was that how what was your actual?
Everybody's more excited. The founder gets validation,
Yeah,
and we know that we're not building something that's going to sit on the app store and do nothing.
yeah.
So literally everybody's happier.
So that really, like, the validation phase really encompasses that, like, fail fast kind of idea, right? Like, hey, it's better if your dream's going to get crushed, it's better to have that happen in the first couple of weeks versus after you've you know you sunk your life saving into an app that's not going to go right.
Yep, fail fast and pivot, and that's how we're going to do that at the beginning instead of at the end of this journey.
Love it. Now let's move on to phase two. So the second part, and I know there's a lot of individual things that are included in that validation phase, but I think that really sums up kind of the point of that. Now the second phase is the prototype. So this is a clickable prototype. This is where they can actually get their app. Kind of speak to what's included in that. What level of what's the importance of that, of making that come into reality, and what does that do for the development of the app going forward?
So this stage is probably the most fun for our founders. I'm just going to be honest with you, because this is the first time that you get to see the idea that you just validated. By the way, you know now that it's actually a good idea and people want this. You now get to see this built. This is almost like building a 3D model of your dream home, and that's really kind of what it is. So what we do is we will meet with you on a weekly basis. You're going to pitch your idea, and we're going to pitch all the results of the validation to our designer, and our designer is then going to build a it looks like a real prototype of the app, and it's clickable, and you walk through and it takes you through the user's journey. This is really, really fun for you because you get to see your app being built and come alive. But that's not what really why we do it. What it really does is it helps build out that frame of what Austin and the development team are going to be building. It gives them that direction. And so when we say, okay, we have a login screen and what the journey of the actual user is going to look like, we can then decide what type of features are going to be needed, what type of APIs are going to be tied in, what type of softwares are we going to have to use to build this. And it really gives us the direction of where we want to go with the actual development. So if you have a development shop who's willing to start building without doing a design, run.
Yeah,
I just feel like if they're not willing to do a design to show it, it's going to be expensive and it's not going to be what you want. I promise you those two things.
And here's the other thing, not everybody's a great designer. You might find a developer who's like, I can design something cool, but a developer and a designer, they're specific rules for a reason. I'm not saying no developer can be a designer and a developer, but it's super hard and really unlikely.
yeah. It's like, after being on so many of these calls with you guys, and you guys use the analogy of building a home, right? It's almost like, now, knowing what I know now, it would almost be like if you had, the guy digging your foundation, and you were like, hey, why don't you just pick out the material that we're going to use on the outside, and why don't you just pick out the floors, and you had him making all those calls, and of course it's not gonna match your vision. So the third thing that's included in this app accelerator program is the development roadmap. Now, this is the one that I know the least about, but I know it is super important, and I know for me, when I've done projects in the past, it's really hard as a non-technical founder. It's hard to manage technical people. And so this one made me really excited, Austin, when you've kind of shown me what's included in this, and you've walked through what happens for some of the clients you've done this with. We've done this with. Can you kind of explain in detail what's included in the development roadmap, and why is it so important?
So basically what the development roadmap is we take this design file and we're going to go through this screen by screen, and we're going to try and make a technical decisions. So for example, we need to figure out where you're going to save your information, how, like, what's going to tell the app what needs to be displayed. So we're going to go basically all the way through your app, and we're going to build a quote for you. And the quote that we give is way more likely to be right. I'm not going to say I'm 100% right, but it's way more likely to be right than you approaching me and saying, hey, here's my idea. How much is it going to cost? So this way I can actually walk through, see exactly how the app flows, and start planning it out. And what you're going to do in this step is figure out ways to save money. So this is my favorite part, because I would say 50% of the time I go in and give them a quote and they're like, holy shit, there's no way I can afford that. But what we can go do is we can take this and start refining it. We can either pull features out, simplify it. This is business. We're going to iterate and we're going to help you. Like, be ready to pivot. And so we're going to have that fun conversation of, hey, if we were to release this, this, and this, and it's not even a fun conversation. We know exactly what the users want. So it's, if we refine these things, you're still going to have success. And so the development roadmap phase is to really get the technical people behind it and tell you suggestions on how you should go about it. We're going to give you not a foolproof quote, but a better quote than you would get by just asking me how it would cost over lunch. And we're going to refine it. So once we go through the development phase, if we are out of budget, I just go back to our designer and say, hey, we just need to modify these things and we'll fit in budget. And it's that simple.
The point you just said, Austin, though, that I think is so cool is that these founders are able to understand their budget before they start developing, right? So it's better to find out before you start, hey, oh, I can't afford that. That's going to max out our budget if we do all 25 features, rather than finding out 6 months down the road, right? And I think that's one of the big things that separates what we're doing at Strides from every other dev shop is you've really eliminated that roadblock of people starting an app and stalling out 6 months through and running out of funding, running out of momentum, running out of energy, and having like a halfway done kind of thing, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So another thing with like the development roadmap is like, it's not easy to build either, right? Like, it doesn't take 5 minutes or an hour to tell you how much your app's going to cost. We're budgeting at least, 25 hours to actually go in and thoroughly explain to you what it looks like to build your app.
Gotcha. And on that point is this whole package. So when somebody has their validation, they have their prototype, they have their development roadmap. Obviously, if it's the right project, you guys would love to take it on. But is this something that a founder could come in and do this portion of the process with you, and then take it to their internal dev team, or take it to another shop, or have somebody
Take it to investors.
Yeah. Oh yeah, take it to investors. Okay.
Yeah, like literally, you're bringing validation, you're bringing design and a development roadmap. This can be used in so many different ways.
So
right?
this isn't just a product just to hook them in and then they can't take it and run with it. This is like a standalone thing that they could, their own deliverables, they could do whatever with.
And that's really why we have built the App Accelerator program. That is its own product, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do that validation, we're going to build that design, and we're going to also build that development roadmap. And you're going to take that, and at that point, you have a product and you can decide what next steps are. If you want to take that back to your development team and show them everything, awesome. If you want to hire your own development team, or if you need to take that to investors and get funding for that, or if you want to continue to work with us, it's going to be a breeze because we're already on board. We already understand the process. We already understand the designs. So you can hire us to develop it. We'll be excited about it because, we did all these stages with you. Again, this is its own standalone product. And so you can take that. It is yours. Take it to wherever you need, whatever steps are. If we can help you the rest of the way, awesome. We'll be giving each other high fives for the next couple of weeks and building an awesome app. But if not, we're excited to see you guys succeed regardless.
Cool. Right on. I think that's cool. Thanks for hopping on and running everybody through this. So now for the founder that is sitting there, that's like, hey, this is me. I want more. I want to work with these guys. I want to validate my app. I want to do all of that. What are kind of the next steps, and how do they get going with us?
Perfect. Awesome question, Shane. So really, if this is what you're listening to and you're like, man, this sounds exactly what I want, you just need to book a strategy call with Austin and myself, which is on the page here. Just go ahead and click book a strategy call. We'll jump on. We'll talk with you. We'll talk you through specifically with your idea, and we'll just kind of give you any tips and pointers, and then we'll kind of talk about what next steps are and how to go from there.
Right on. Happy building, everybody, and hopefully we see you soon.